Welcome to Green Building Supply. My name is Melanie.
And I'm Aaron.
And today we're going to teach you how to caulk, how to load a caulking gun, and all the elements that you'll need for your project.
So what we have here is we have first the caulk that you're going to use. Make sure it's the right color and the right application. We have some other videos that'll tell you which one to choose. The next most important thing is, do you have a good caulk gun? We'll show you a few in this video, but I recommend just getting a good metal one. Don't buy the cheapest one in the store. They do break.
They always break.
I've broken a few. Make sure you have a rag or two on hand, a sharp utility blade, and these are some backer rod, foam backer rod that you can use. If you have really wide cracks that you're caulking, you might want to shove these in the cracks so that you don't waste a lot of the caulk. So
and
this is
optional.
It
takes time to do that. Yeah.
Right. These are also really handy for when you're done caulking to save the tube of caulk. You can poke this on and it will stop it from drying out. We also have some rubber gloves and some dish soap. The dish soap is actually to put on your finger when you're wiping to make a really clean line, and you can use dish soap or you can use rubbing alcohol. I think the dish soap works a little better. Note that this is different than traditional caulks. A lot of caulks you can just use water, but because Chemlink caulks are moisture curable, the water just makes it stick to your finger. So that's why we're using dish soap or alcohol.
And frankly, you wouldn't want necessarily a caulking material that cleans up with water or would start to dissolve with water, because usually you're using these in areas that might come in contact with water. You want them to keep the integrity of the product. And these are totally non-toxic caulking materials that we're using today because we're using some of our own. So the gloves are really here not to protect your fingers necessarily, but because this product is so sticky, it's so tacky that it will tack itself to you. And if it's on you, you'll get it all over your clothes or all over your caulking gun, which just makes your job more difficult. Yeah,
cleanup's a lot easier with the gloves, especially if you get a phone call in the middle of your job. You can just peel them off and actually pick up your phone. The last thing is just to have some sort of container that you can put extra caulk into so you don't get it on your work surface. So let's get started.
All right.
So I'm gonna put on my gloves first thing. And these are just disposable gloves. And we are going to trim the top of the caulk. So you want to cut this edge off as small of a hole as possible usually, because you can always make it bigger. If you make it too big, if you cut this off somewhere in this range, you're going to get a really wide bead of caulk. You're going to use up more caulk faster. You would only do that if you have a very big gap that you're caulking. But for most trim, you would want to cut a very small amount off, and you can always make that bigger if you need to.
So the cut you're making is determining the bead of caulk that's coming out of the caulking gun. So you don't want it too thick.
So I can do this a couple ways. I can use my sharp utility blade and I can press this in at the edge. There's also a lot of caulk guns. This one doesn't have a cutter on it, but I have a couple other options. This has a blade right here that you can stick the caulk into, and it will actually cut that off for you. However, I do think you get a better cut with a sharp utility blade. So we're going to take this here and we're just going to, at an angle, press this through like that. And you'll notice, I don't know if you can see this tiny little tip on here. I want to take that off because it's going to leave a little groove in my caulk line. So we're just going to very carefully nip that off. The sharper the blade, the better the cut. The better the cut, the easier it is to make a beautiful looking caulk line.
Now there's another element to these caulking tubes that we want to show you, and Aaron has a piece where he's cut off the top tube so he can show you what's inside, but essentially there's a clear plastic film that's keeping everything inside watertight and airtight.
Yeah, and so you want to make sure that you puncture this before you try to caulk. If you try to press the handle of the caulk gun and it's not coming out, that's because you've still got this piece stopping it and sealing it. And that's really important because it keeps the tube of caulk lasting longer on the shelf. So we are going to take this, and a lot of caulk guns will have a metal piece here. You can use a nail or a screw as well. This is located on the handle. You'll notice these other caulk guns have it located here.
These are really nice because they're long and all the same size. So if you have a nail, it would be tapered in thickness and you might not make it all the way down.
This one's on the bottom here. So they're usually hidden somewhere on the caulk gun. You can find yours. And we're gonna take ours and we're going to just shove it in here. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna work this around in a circle. So I'm trying to get that piece of foil completely off. You don't wanna just poke it once, that's not a big enough hole. So you'll notice I'm gonna rotate this, I'm gonna poke it in, pull it out, and just rotate and turn about 10 times or more. When you pull it out, you're gonna wipe off this little bit.
And hopefully you have a little bit showing that you've punctured the film.
Right. And then we'll tuck this away. We're done with that for now. So now we're gonna load the caulk gun. We wanna pull this plunger back. Notice that it won't pull back. That's a good thing. We need to release it with our thumb. So we're gonna release it with our thumb and then this should just slide back. Notice this slides really nice because this is a fairly new caulk gun. If I have this old guy, this thing is a little more rickety, right? So caulk guns can get kind of old and grimy with age. So we're using a newer one for this video, but you might have to, you know, pull some force on it. Just make sure you're releasing that here. So we're gonna release this. We're gonna load our caulk gun in, our caulk in, and there we go. A pro tip is to actually take a marker and mark here on this edge so that I can see the long end of the tip. It's hard when you're at a distance to tell how this is rotated, and so now I have a visual point of reference to know how to apply that. So we're just gonna use a marker for that. And now we're gonna get this started, and we're going to just put a little pressure on here. It's gonna slide the plunger and start pushing that caulk out. As soon as it comes out, I'm gonna release the pressure with my thumb. Notice that this is not coming out. If this is continually coming out, it's because there's pressure built up here and you need to release that with your thumb. Some caulk guns, just might even be worth showing. Some caulk guns are dripless, or so they're called, which means if you have it in here and we push a little bit out and I release, it stops. That's called the dripless caulk gun.
So that's a more expensive feature.
They cost a little more. It's really not necessary.
Unless you're doing multiple caulking jobs, in which case you would appreciate that feature.
We're gonna use the traditional one here. It's fine.
We'll suffer for this video.
Okay, so I'm gonna just get a little pressure there. And now, we are gonna caulk the edge of this piece of wood. Now before you caulk, you wanna just make sure that this is nice and clean.
And also dry.
Clean and dry. However, the Chemlink caulks can be put on even if it's raining out. I would still, even if it was raining, I would still wipe it to get any dirt off of there. But they are moisture curable.
So if you're inside and it's a shower application and it hasn't rained, but perhaps someone showered recently, you would also not need to worry about that, except if the water had little dirt and debris in it.
Right.
You would want to wipe that off.
So what we're gonna do here is we're gonna angle our bead of caulk right in this groove. And what I found works best is to keep the motion, control. It's very hard to control how fast the caulk comes out. Depending on the temperature, depending on what type of caulk, it's gonna come out at a different rate. So instead of trying to control it with your fingers, control the rate of how fast you move the caulk gun. So I'm gonna get it started here. And I'm gonna go a little bigger than necessary just to show you. And if I slow down, you'll notice it pools up. And if I go fast, you'll notice it goes much smaller. Now, if I stop here and I realize, you know, that's not a big enough bead of caulk, I can come back. But whenever you have to go back and touch up, you're not gonna get as big or as nice of a bead of caulk. It's gonna take a little more work to smooth it out. So I'm gonna add a little more caulk on here. It's always better to get it the first round. Okay, once you're done, we're gonna stop it there. I'm gonna wipe off the excess. We're gonna set this to the side. So this is not the most beautiful line of caulk, and that's okay. We're gonna fix that. So we've got our gloves on. We're gonna get our soap, and usually I would put this soap into a container, but for this video, we're just gonna put it directly. Maybe, is this locked? See if you can get that. There we go, okay. So we're just gonna dip this right on the edge of our finger. It's okay to have a lot of soap on your finger. This is gonna make it glide easier and smooth off. If it starts to build up on your finger, let's try it first actually on my pinky without the soap, and you'll notice it's gonna start to grab, right? And it's not gonna be as smooth. Whereas if we use the one with soap, it's gonna glide along and we're gonna make a really nice bead. Now because I had too much caulk on there, it got gooped up. Don't keep spreading it. You're just gonna make that line worse. So we're gonna wipe off the excess, get a little more soap on our finger, and come back and smooth that out. And again, we've got too much on here. And then you have a nice smooth bead. And then if you want to come back here and clean up this edge, you can just keep playing with this. Just make sure you've got enough soap on your finger to make it look good. So this, obviously, you would want to paint over this part, right? That's a little sloppy. So if I were going to redo this, if I wasn't going to be painting that surface, I would put on even less caulk so that you're barely putting any in that crack so that you're not spreading so much. If you do end up with something like this and you want to clean it off, you can come back with a scraper or a razor and try to shave off some of this so that you don't have such a big caulk line.
That's also a good reason to use something like rubbing alcohol too, because you could get rubbing alcohol just where you messed up and that'd be a really easy cleanup, as long as your physiology can handle rubbing alcohol.
Right. And you can also come back with a rag. This is a little bit coarse, but you could come back, and I'm not actually going in the groove, I'm just trying to take up some of this excess, and I can press pretty hard and take off some of that, and then find a new clean part of the rag.
Yeah, that worked pretty well.
Yeah, find a new clean part of the rag and come back. And you can, again, keep playing with this. If this is your first time caulking and you're caulking something critical that you're going to see a lot, like right around your kitchen backsplash or right around your bathtub, you might want to just make a little mock-up piece like this and just try a foot or so that you get a hang of it. You can come back, smooth this out, and then even play with your finger again and come back and get this. And then you have something smooth that you're happy with and you can come back and paint. When you're done, I don't have too much on my fingers, which is nice, but I also only caulked 1 foot. If you're doing a lot of caulking, you might end up with a lot. You can toss these gloves, wait for this to dry enough so that it skins over, and then you can paint over it. So hopefully that was helpful. That's how to use a caulk gun. When you're done, you want to release the pressure here with your thumb. You're gonna pull this out. Yep, go ahead and take that out. And the key to keeping this tube alive is to put something inside. Now, if you don't have one of these handy caulk savers, you can use a nail or a screw.
Or saran wrap over a nail or a screw.
Yeah, it's actually best to do both. So if you can stick something in there, and now my hole is actually a little small for this spike, but we're gonna force it in, yeah. That's gonna shove in there. There we go. And that goes over the whole thing. If you don't have one of these, I would stick a nail in and then also put tape or saran wrap around it to try to keep this tube alive. There is a shelf life to most caulk, but really it comes down to if it dries out from the nozzle here. So those are the tips on how to use a caulk gun. My name's Aaron. Thanks for watching.
Thank you.
Bye.